Welcome back to another episode of the MindFit Movement Podcast. Today on the show, I have the lovely Kylie McBeth. How are you, Kylie?
I'm lovely. How are you?
Well, I call you Kai, so I'm just going to call you Kai throughout this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone.
How are
happy
you?
to be here. I'm good.
Yeah, good. So Kai, from what I know of, you are you are a certified health coach, emotional expert. You're a co-founder with your twin sister of an awesome health company called Zero Health.
Yeah.
And also you have your own podcast.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, crushing it.
Crushing it.
Just listing all the labels.
Listen all the labels. So what is your prime sort of thing that you do in this world? What's the most area you sort of dance and play in? And I love to say, what gets your juices flowing?
Yeah, so many threads get my juices flowing these days, but primarily my focus in my life's work has been around human relationships, as well as the intersection between relationships and liberating consciousness. So becoming aware of our limiting beliefs, but also the wounds, the triggers, the traumas that get in the way of a deeper intimacy with self and with other. So supporting people and coming back home to, of course, themselves, their bodies, their emotions, their desires, their soul, like what their purpose is for being here on this planet. And with that healing journey and the creation of personal sovereignty, leading now into in my life's work is more around like a collective liberation through self-ownership and self-belonging. So being so completely self-contained in your body, in your experience, in your own energy, that you are listening and in congruence with your mind, body, heart, and soul. Because I think that congruency is what this planet needs in order to usher in a new world, a new way of being, of relating, and of living. So major focus right now is actually my book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I completely cleared off my 2020 calendar in order to devote all of my energy to the completion of my first book. So that's where all of my energy is going right now. I have a lot of fun connecting with people, but at the core, I'm a writer and I'm a researcher, and I love connecting with other people, but I also love writing about the human experience and storytelling and utilizing those methods of words and story to create more connection.
Wow. How exciting.
I know, I'm so stoked. It's been like 6 years in the works of like the voice came in 6 years ago and was like, write a book. And I was like, absolutely not. No, I'm not worthy of that. Like, it was like, I'm not worthy. Nobody cares what I have to say. Like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not a writer. You know, all of the BS, all of the psychic trolls that are just like, don't do that. Stay small, stay hiding, stay quiet, act like a lady, don't share the truth. You know, all of that stuff I've had to burn to the ground over the last 6 years. And it's taken a lot of work. So now to finally get to this place where I'm claiming it as like, this is my work feels super liberating. Like I'm on a new wave, but also like, oh shit, what does this world look like? So
that's going to be the best book. I can't wait. Cause I feel like we actually have a lot in common. And the way that Jamie Ray sort of explained it was like kinship. Cause like, I feel like I have a lot of kinship with him as well. And he was saying, because I listened to your potty that you did with him, and he was like, that you guys were just vibing, and I was just like in my car, like vibing with what you guys were saying. I felt like I was in the conversation too, but I just couldn't say anything.
Darn it, we got to get you in on that. We'll do a triple pod. That would be amazing.
As he would probably call it.
He totally would.
Yeah. Oh, God. That's awesome. So yeah, it's funny you say about those Psyche Trolls, because I'm pretty sure everybody has them, because I definitely do. And there was, you know, before starting this podcast, I had a lot of psyche trolls happening in my head, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
But yeah, long story short, got into it and loving it. But could you explain, like, where do those trolls come from? Like, are you born with them?
Oh man. How long do you have to really unpack where all of those trolls come from? They come from a myriad of different places. Truly, a lot of them stem from culture, over culture. So some of the narratives that are just a part of the culture in which we live in. So I know in Australia you have that tall poppy syndrome. That shit is real over there.
Oh yeah.
Like that's like, it's gnarly actually. Like if you get too high, then people cut you at the knees. I mean, and we see that, and we watch that in the media and the news. Like the bigger you get or the more space you take up, you might experience more abandonment or disenfranchisement or a myriad of different things. But then you also have to look in your personal timeline of like, where in your life have you experienced somebody rejecting a part of you? And this, every single human that I've ever come in contact with has experienced this. And sometimes not even intentionally, from and within our family systems, in our school systems, with friends on the playground, with not fitting into societal norms, like depending on what you look like and what your body looks like all of it. It's like, there's so many layers to this conversation. And then you have to look at intergenerationally, where, and ancestrally, and through your lineage of all of the survival strategies and adaptations that brought you here in order to be safe in this world. Because historically, if you did take up more space, if you did speak your truth, or if you did stand in your power, a lot of the times you were not celebrated. You might have been exiled. You might have been punished. Like, so we still have a lot of this remnants, I think, in our DNA. And and they show up in the psyche, of course. But I always like to say, it's any toxic energy that has ever come towards us, both explicitly and implicitly, that kind of becomes this internalized voice that keeps us stuck in our survival adaptations, and acting like, unfortunately, children, like we're afraid, terrified of actually moving forward and taking up space. And so when you look at it through that lens, it offers, I think, individuals a lot more space to be curious with themselves, as like why we're afraid to move forward and why those voices are present. And then also the compassion towards self for being afraid, because I think it all does come back down to fear, like truly afraid of something happening when you take that step forward and take that leap and create, I'm going to fail, people are going to judge me, like all of those things. So real, so human. We all go through it. Yeah. So I hope that answered your question. It's a layered question, layered answer.
Yeah.
Every direction.
Yeah. Exactly. So you said in there about DNA, like we have it in our DNA. Like what do you mean by that?
Like, excuse me, say what?
Yeah.
So they're tracing it back to currently, so epigenetic factors. So
what does that mean?
So epigenetic is how I love you, is how our environments affect the expression of our DNA.
Okay.
So they're tracing these epigenetic markers that kind of control and express in DNA all the way back to 7 generations.
Wow.
Currently. And I think it probably goes back even further than that, but like 7 generations, you potentially are carrying that survival adaptation from 7 generations ago. And that's that adaptation that might say, stay small, be quiet, act this way, act in alignment with status quo, whatever it might be. But it's stored in our body as like memory, cellular memory. And we feel that somatically. I think a lot of the somatic symptoms that we face on the planet, and people might call me woo for this, but there's deeper layers.
You are woo.
I'm so woo. Give me all the woo.
Yeah.
there's deeper layers to it. There's emotional, there's intergenerational, there is ancestral, and that's the work. Like, what do we need to do and heal in order to open up a new doorway, create a doorway where there's a wall? And what's the point of living if we're not stepping forward and kind of taking up more space and saying yes to our own journey?
Yeah.
You're right. It's like dying, like you said before we started recording. It's like, oh, stagnancy. It doesn't feel good. Well, yeah, it's not supposed to, because it's not in alignment with the natural rhythm of life.
Yeah. It's, life's forever changing and evolving, right?
Yeah, ebbs and flows.
Ebbs and flows. Yeah. Ups and downs.
Life,
highs and
death,
lows.
life.
Exactly. So to keep going on the DNA, because this is something that I actually really wanted to talk to you about, was like trauma and your face just lit up.
Let's talk about trauma.
Because from what I know and like from my learnings, trauma is my I guess complete understanding of it happens from when you're a child and you're growing up and certain things happen, and then you kind of have to shape and mold yourself into this person to survive, right? Because that's what we're survival mechanisms,
right?
And then but that trauma can be stored in the body, right? And then to move past that, we have to release that.
Correct.
But I heard on one of your podcasts that trauma can be in your body before you're even born.
Yes.
So I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about that, because my mum and I were actually chatting about it, and she was like, she's like, because she listens to your podcast and she loves it.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Hi, Mom. Love that.
So we were chatting about this, and I was like, I'm actually going to ask Kai when I get her on my potty.
Yeah.
What does she mean by this?
So very similar to what I was expressing just a few moments ago, is there's like intergenerational trauma. So these are like trauma templates that have been passed down through our lineage. And then there's transgenerational, which is also very similar, is passed down through our lineage. But there's also in utero trauma. So if the mother is stressed, high levels of cortisol, depending on her external environments, that's going to cause a developmental trauma to a baby. Like, and that's where at least myself personally am at in my own journey, is like looking back at like birth trauma. And so many of us have experienced birth trauma, especially in the Western paradigm. So you have your ancestral trauma, right? Intergenerational, transgenerational, and then you have shock trauma. Shock trauma is like abuse, natural disaster, things that are like a major shock, an event, where we feel powerless. And in the somatic experiencing world, or people who are actually looking at healing from a somatic body-based perspective, trauma is not an event, it's an experience in the body. So what you might experience as a trauma, in your internal experience, maybe a sibling or somebody else does not experience it in the same way as you did, depending on your predisposition and sensitivity in that environment. So it's like everyone kind of has their own internal experience to everything, which, of course, creates a lot of variation. Yeah. As we can all see in our family systems, when our siblings are like, I didn't experience it that way. You're like, how did you not experience it that way? Like, you're just like shocked. But it's because we all have a different trauma template. And then you have developmental trauma. And so developmental trauma is the more subtle, like, attachment trauma that we experience in our early relationships with our primary caregivers. And that's when any of our core emotional needs are not met 100% of the time, which it's not even realistic to expect, especially in our current systems, for our parents to be able to meet our needs 100% of the time. And so over time we start to lose trust, we lose connection, we lose like all of these, there's an environmental failure. And so what happens somatically when we experience those traumas over and over is, without the capacity to utilize our survival instincts, which is fight, flight, right? Like run or fight back to get out of the environment, we freeze. And so then we shut down, because it's like, well, I can't fight and I can't flee because my relationship with my primary caregiver is more important than anything, because that is our survival. So what will happen in that for a child specifically is, when we don't have access to actually move that survival energy and complete that cycle of the nervous system, we create what are called pride or shame-based identifications. So we make it mean that there's something wrong with us.
Okay.
Like, I am bad, I am broken, it's my fault. And that's where a lot of, again, those narratives come up that we're talking about, those psychic trolls, because they're all kind of rooted in this early developmental trauma, a lot of them. And that's where we have to start to separate the story from the actual or survival energy that hasn't been completed in our nervous systems. That's why most of my work is now focusing on, especially with clients or even on podcasts, I tell everyone the importance of somatic therapy, like working with the body to release stuck survival energy. Because most of us are on the scale, at least from what I see through my lens, which could be incorrect, is we're experiencing a lot of disassociation on the planet, or disembodiment. So we're not actually in our bodies. We're not actually feeling. There's a lot of dysregulation in our nervous system because we haven't completed these survival responses due to developmental or shock trauma or ancestral or, transgenerational, intergenerational trauma. And that's because there hasn't been enough space, truly, I think internally, but also culturally, for us to do this deeper work. But on the planet, as we can all see, as we're all evolving, there's not only a necessity that we do this work, but it's now the time and place to do this work. Whereas our parents didn't have the base needs to even have these conversations sometimes, like just putting food on the table, paying a mortgage, like taking care of kids. Like, we weren't talking about trauma, right? So I think it's so important to not bring blame, shame, or judgment into this conversation, because I know that's where a lot of it can go real quick. Where it's like, oh, it's your fault. And it's like, well, when you zoom out and you start to look at the picture as a whole, no one's at fault. Like, it's the way this whole world has been operating, has been birthed out of trauma. And now it's like this time to heal the trauma so that we can birth a new world out of actually, hopefully, alignment. And I might be speaking from a very big optimistic bubble on this one, but I am a full-blooded optimist and a humanist. But I think I'm going to go full circle on you here, is completing and getting curious about how embodied we are. Like, and how our nervous system is operating. And you'll see a lot of this in our culture, is like anxiety, depression, right? And so so anxiety is like hyper arousal. So that's when the nervous system is super activated. And then you have hypoarousal, and that's like more of that depressive apathy. And that's like where the nervous system is kind of in that more of a freeze state. And the goal, through reparenting, through somatic therapy, through doing all of the beautiful healing work that we're all being invited to do right now, is to expand our window of tolerance so that we have more internal flexibility and capacity to sit with this human experience, which, by the way, is incredibly painful at times. Which, feeling pain sucks. We all know that. Which is why we avoid it. And we create this like dysregulated nervous system because we're trying to cope with reality. But I think the opportunity now is to do the deeper work necessary to expand our capacity to sit with being human. And that requires that self-healing work. Taking it internal and being like, okay, I'm committed, I'm devoted to coming back into my body, to feeling. And that's a brave journey to take.
Yeah.
Like, I really have so much acknowledgement for anybody who is creating space in their lives to feel and to go within and to heal these deeper layers, because it's not easy, you know, like, and I don't want to paint it as that. And I actually think it's a privilege. You know, a lot of people on the planet are, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, are in trying to meet their base needs.
Yeah.
And that breaks my heart, because I'm just like, oh, like, not that they don't probably live a better life than a lot of people at the top, you know, financially, because I think that, yeah, anyways, we don't need to get into that. I could unpack culture and society, and we don't, yeah, I don't think that's necessary right now. But anyways,
Yeah.
deep bows to anybody doing the work to really create enough space to move forward and reconnect to their life force. Because once you actually get back into your body and you've actually completed some of these stuck and frozen responses, it's called like de-thawing, like thawing out the nervous system is what it's called. You start to come online again. It's almost like in the Matrix, where you're like, oh, here we are, a part of this. You start to see clear. It's really interesting what happens, actually. In my own experience, it's been eye-opening, but it's also been very sensitizing, in that I was like, wow, I didn't see a lot of this stuff before, because I was so narrow-minded. But that when I started to release that survival energy, I was able to expand my awareness and see a much bigger picture, which requires that we take up more responsibility as well.
Yeah.
Because when you see a bigger picture, you become more responsible for the picture you see.
Yes. That's so true.
That was a lot. Sorry,
Oh,
people.
holy shit.
You're traumatized by this.
Well, you got me. You got me. You got me in the feels before, when you were talking about feeling and actually, you know, getting into your body and feeling what you're feeling. And so what came up for me was like, I have been learning how to feel more, and learning like, why don't I feel? Like, why did I run away from feeling, right? And I can see it. I can see how it happened. And you know, I don't mean to like throw anyone under the bus here, but because they're only doing what they know. But like, I have a little sister. She's like nearly 4 years old, right? And we were all outside, and she was like distracted with something, and then we all went inside, and my stepmom like closed the door, and she, by accident, she closed the glass door instead of the flywire door, right? And then Lulu, which is my little sister, started crying. And then my dad was like, oh, what happened? And my dad's like actually gotten a lot better at this stuff. And he was like, oh, what happened? And then he's like, Mummy locked me out. And then her mum was like, oh, stop crying. Get over it, you know? And I was like, whoa. And then she came in, like Lulu came in, and she was crying. And she's like, oh. And then like her mum reenacted what she was doing. And it was like, oh. And it was kind of like, the way that I took it and the way that I felt was a lot of shame for crying. You know what I mean? And I was just like, oh, fuck. You know, this is how it starts, you know, like this is, and again, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, and I'm not trying to shame anybody for treating their kids that way, but just want to have this conversation so that it can make people more aware and awake. But yeah, like it was like, holy shit, that's, you know, that's where we're taught to, it's not okay to cry.
Do
you know what I mean?
I hear you. And thank you for sharing that story so vulnerably. It's such an incredible example of how subtle this how subtle, well, in that case, it doesn't seem so subtle, but like when we look at it through a child's lens, you're like, wow, that is really traumatizing. To be shamed and mocked and to be told to shut up. And sometimes that can be even more extreme with parents. And that's where that rejection, right? Rejection of self comes in. And that's where that shame piece. Anybody who has felt rejected for feeling what they feel, for being who they are, will shut down and repress those vital parts of their personality or their self, their being.
Yeah.
And in order to keep those repressed, we have to rely on narratives such as shame and guilt and anxiety to keep, the brake pedal. Don't let those parts of you out, because you're going to be shamed again. You're going to be rejected, and that's painful. So in order to avoid feeling the original rejection, we then reject ourselves, right? And we create this massive pain gap between who we truly are and who we're being, because we've had to become something else in order to fit in order to be loved, in order to be safe in our family environment. And so closing that pain gap, like you're describing, is like being able to see and name and go back to those uncomfortable experiences and back into your body and those uncomfortable experiences, and allowing that little child to be seen, to be heard, to be felt, and to be nurtured and loved in a way that reminds them that they are safe, that they matter, that they're valuable. Like, all of that work is incredibly important, incredibly. And I really acknowledge you for turning towards instead of running, and reopening the door to your heart so that you can begin to feel deeper, because we need people feeling. It's, and then our parents parent the same way they were parented. It's like, right, when we zoom out, and that's where there's this both and is like, they need to take responsibility for how they showed up, and then it's like, and we can also hold, to some extent, depending on your environment and family system, and everybody's different here, then there's that compassion piece of like, wow, what did they have to experience in order to create and recreate that dynamic in their own parenting process. And I'll say that, at least from my experiences, that usually throughout the generations, it gets better and better. Like, it's horribly traumatic. And then it's like, okay, we can choose to do a little bit better, but there's still some. And then it's like, and we can never get it 100% right, So also the grace in that. But I think, shame is something that not a lot of people want to feel, which I totally get, because it's awful. Disgust and like feeling like you want to throw up. And that's what prevents a lot of people from taking responsibility, is that shame piece. Because if I take responsibility, then I have to own that the way I showed up wasn't to my best. That potentially caused pain. Right?
Yeah.
So I know that a lot of the younger generations are shaking the boat on this, especially in their family systems.
Yeah.
And it's causing a lot of a lot of waves.
Yeah.
Especially in my family, they're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, well, this was my experience.
Yeah.
And I remember, bless my father, but he was like, I think you need to keep it up top. And I remember internally, like, keep it up top, like stop feeling, basically, because that's what he had been told and taught his whole life in order to survive and in order to move forward. It's just like, let it, time will heal. And it's like, no. And I remember internally in that moment saying to myself, I will never keep it up top again. And then as you might know, I know personally, like, I go in, I'm talking about everything. I'm like, let's liberate the whole conversation, because anything that goes underground and is pushed, like, is really driving the boat. And we think that we're so much in our conscious control, which is such an illusion. It's like, no, there's a lot of other drivers that are in the driving seat. And if you don't do the work to look at your shadow material and all of your repressed emotion, it's going to get the best of you at some point. It's gotten the best of me more than I care to count. And it's deeply humbling when it happens, but you're like, damn, I thought I was I thought I was doing good on this whole awareness journey. It looks like I still, the work never ends. But
yeah, exactly right. Yeah, forever working. And it's just to add quickly, it's like it doesn't mean like you're completely flawed and fucked up that you have to keep doing all this work. Like, yeah. You
it can be fun.
Yes, exactly.
Like we can infuse this with play and laughter and storytelling. This is why community is so important right now for our healing journey. It's like, this is not an individual ride. You're not here to heal alone. Yes, there is a part of this journey that is absolutely sacred solo journey that everyone needs to go through. But we also need each other. That's why, like, you sharing your vulnerability on your platform, which I've seen, which is incredible to witness, and inviting other men in all humans, no matter how we identify, into this conversation of a deeper healing and deeper connection with these deeper layers is so beautiful to witness and to see, because when we come together and share our stories, shame can't live or exist there. Brene Brown talks about that a lot, and she's pretty much saved my life when it comes to the topic of shame. If anybody hasn't read her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, highly recommend it. It's such a potent, powerful book. But this is why coming together, at least for me, and cultivating sisterhood and also deep relationships with my male friends has kind of has supported me more than anything in releasing the shackles of shame that have kept me in boxes of fear. And it's like, every time I kind of share a story or get a little more vulnerable, I'm a little more liberated. I'm safe to be me, right? And we through that process of allowing, of opening, of being vulnerable, we not only support a deeper connection, which is, I think, the whole purpose for being here, is being in connection. But we also create more regulation in our nervous systems and co-regulation, where we start to recode and repattern all of those beliefs from trauma, which is, I'm safe here. All of me is welcome here.
Yeah, I love that.
I can be me. I can be loved. I can be accepted for who I truly am. And that's that courageous journey we all take. It's like, okay, I'm gonna release this next layer. Yeah. And be like, okay, is this welcome here? And that's why surrounding yourself with people who are cheerleaders and people who support this process and people who have your best interest and support you to your highest potential is number one. If you have not only psychic trolls, you don't need that shit in your external world too. So like, call people forward, set a boundary. Like, I'm no longer going to engage in this type of conversation or communication or trauma or gossip, whatever it might be, because it's not supporting me in moving forward in my life. So we all have to hold each other accountable to that. We really do. Yeah. We don't have time for that. Nah. And we don't have time for that anymore.
Ain't got time for that shit.
Ain't got time for that. Like,
so like, while we're on the topic of shame, I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. just a little bit.
Why not?
Like not. I mean, we've got 15 minutes, I think.
Cool.
Yeah. So, like, what does shame, what's the best way to ask this? What's the best way shame sort of shows up, or like, what does it look like? Yeah. And how does it affect us?
Oh my gosh. So I call it the shame core.
The shame core.
And the shame core is created by big T trauma, small t trauma. So any experience where we felt violated or helpless or rejected for who we truly were. And that kind of all spirals together and creates the shame core. And the shame core operates on these three beliefs, which is, I am broken, I am unlovable, and I am unworthy. So that's what kind of keeps the shame core really rocking, is like those three core beliefs. And oh gosh, shame keeps us small. It keeps us hiding. It keeps us from stepping forward. It keeps us from sharing our our true feelings. It keeps us from sharing our truth. It keeps us from believing that we deserve more, or that we are worthy of more, whether that be in relationship, in our career, in our lives, in our in every single area of our life. It basically just kind of is like, I almost like liken it to like chains that just keep us small and afraid of actually being seen. Mm-hmm. Like at its fundamental level, it blocks connection. Like shame keeps us disconnected from our true selves because of trauma. So of course we have to make sure that we bring that into this conversation, because it's there for a good reason. Like all of these armors and these protective mechanisms and these strategies that we all use. So like perfectionism, people pleasing, like all of that is like a really great way to try to compensate.
That's me. Right?
Guilty of all of them. Yeah. And we learn to compensate, you know, and try to transform ourselves into these pretzels in order to be seen, safe, and loved. But the unfortunate part about this is, one, we never feel truly loved for who we are, because we're not being who we truly are, which is such a conundrum. And then two, we don't trust when other people love us because we're not actually being who we truly are, you know? Like there's a lot of self-abandonment, you know, when shame comes into the play. And it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to really reclaim these parts of us that have been pushed underground, that have been pushed into our shadow, that have been ashamed, that have been shamed, that are terrified of coming out. Because even when you look at this from a bigger lens, and I go macro and I go micro, but like culturally, for instance, like sensuality, sexuality, so much shame around that whole topic of conversation. So what happens? It all gets pushed underground. And then it comes out in weird ways because it's not safe to actually have a healthy expression of our sensuality or sexuality. And then when it does come out, or it's, you know, we see, I'm just going to use the example of the Super Bowl halftime show because people love talking about that right now, which doesn't even make sense to me. That's a conversation. I'm just like, what? Like, I'm shocked. But again, it goes to show you how small my bubble is like, I've really surrounded myself with people who are, I don't need to, anyways. But it's like, it triggers people who haven't done the work to reclaim those parts of themselves. And that's really, I think, the big invitation for anything like that's triggering, like deeply. There's usually shame there and an opportunity to turn that trigger into a deeper intimacy with that part of yourself that you've rejected or you've had to reject in order to feel safe, to feel worthy, to feel loved. So it's a big reclamation. Is like whenever we feel shame, that's the invitation to reclaim that part of ourselves.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Shame. May we all share what we feel ashamed about so that we can liberate ourselves to move forward in our lives. Yeah.
So does shame, like, is shame working with our ego? Like, is it all working together? You know, like trauma and then shame and then ego, you know, like, because it's all just trying to keep us safe.
Yes. It's all created. You're right. Like, number one priority is survival. And and this is interesting, is because the more trauma we face or have faced, whether intergenerationally through our lineage or in this personal lifetime, our own history, the more shame we feel, the more fragmented we become, like all of these different parts everywhere internally. And the more disconnected we are from a greater mystery, from our bodies, from our soul, from something bigger, from something deeper, from something wiser, from something that unites us all, like that bigger force, if you will, the divine God, a goddess, whatever the heck you use to describe that greater mystery, which for me, I didn't even come in contact with until in my middle of my 20s, where I was like, oh, I'm not just this individual person. Like, I was so highly identified with ego because I needed to be. I was hyper vigilant, right? If you experience trauma, which many of us, I don't think you walk this planet without trauma. I really don't.
Yeah.
Because we live in a traumatizing environment right now.
Yeah.
Like, and to say that we don't is, I think, dangerous, because it needs to change. Anyways, oh gosh, that topic. We've got a lot of heavy lifting, but with grace, with dance, with storytelling, back to like the indigenous ways. It all works together to keep us separate, to keep us disconnected, to keep us disembodied, to keep us out of our power, to keep us from remembering who we truly are and what we're truly capable of. And that's why healing trauma and doing this deeper work to connect to yourself, your soul, your heart, your body is life-changing. Not only for generations past, because once you heal your own, you heal up and you heal down. And then we have this opportunity to create something in more alignment with the collective heart and soul, which really jazzes me up. And I know people think that we're a long way from that. And I'm like, maybe not. I don't know. So it does all work together to keep us fragmented, separated. And And
so how, like, how would you know if you experience shame around a certain part of yourself? Like, how do you first go like, oh yeah, I'm shameful about that? Like, is it a thought? Like, do you feel a certain way about something?
It's a myriad of things. It probably shows up in every single layer. So like, yeah, of course, from a mental level, you'll have the belief, like, I'm bad, I'm broken, or I'm stupid, like whatever flavor your inner critic likes to throw at you.
Oh yeah.
And then somatically, it feels like a collapse, where it's like, I need to collapse. I need to hide. I kind of like your shoulders kind of hunk over, and you might feel it in your gut where it's like, ugh, where you have this pit in your stomach, like you want to hide, like you want to repress yourself or like scoot into a corner. That's in one way shame shows up. I also think that sometimes aggression is a way that we avoid feeling shame.
Okay.
Because there's healthy shame and there's toxic shame. So let's just clarify that. I should have started there, but like healthy shame. Yeah,
what?
Sorry. I know. Shoot. Healthy shame shines a light on where we're acting out of our own integrity. And that's where we need to take responsibility. That's where it's like, ooh,
okay,
I need to take ownership. I need to take responsibility. Like, I wasn't in my integrity. I wasn't in my moral compass. And that's a really important thing for people to feel. And then there's toxic shame, which is what I talked about previously. It's like that shame core of like, I am bad, I am broken. And that's what keeps us small, disconnected, repressed, and fragmented is that toxic shame where it kind of turns in on itself.
Yeah.
And becomes this self-oppressing anesthetic, if you will. Like, kind of just puts us to sleep. Which is really a gnarly visual when you think about it. Like, oh, we're zombies? Weird. But I will say though, and this is huge component to this, is when we are children, we don't have the option to act in our instinctual ways, which is fight or flight, to remove and move ourselves out of an environment that is painful. We also disconnect from our clean anger. Okay. So aggression is shaming, blaming, and barreling down somebody else's personal boundaries. So when we avoid shame with aggression, that's usually an indication of like, oh, there's probably something there. You need to look at that. But healthy anger, clean anger, is this protective energy that we all have. Think about like protective mama bear or protective mom. Like, you can feel that fierceness of like, don't mess with my children, right? And we need to become that within ourselves with our own psychic trolls, but also in expressing external boundaries. Clean anger is a protective energy that lets us know when a personal, emotional, spiritual, psychological boundary has been crossed. Okay. And we had to shut off from that clean anger, which many of us are shut off from because of early trauma. We don't actually have access to that tap or resource to stand up for ourselves. And that is a process within itself. And that's why I recommend somatic therapy, breath work, tons of healing modalities to really get back into right relationship with our instincts. Clean anger. Clean anger being a major one. Because the more anxious you feel, the more probably disconnected you are from your own clean anger and your ability to stand up for yourself and feel safe in this world.
Yeah.
So long story short, we are all beautiful, powerful beings who are on a journey of remembering that through our healing process. So
yeah, that's it. I love how you went into the clean anger, because that's something that I've also been like, what is healthy anger? You know, because like obviously there's toxic anger, and you see, you know, guys that are drunk and like starting fights, and, you know, or like coming home from work and, you know, yelling at their wives and partners for whatever. And you know, and not
vice
just
versa.
saying it, vice versa, because it happens with females. And yeah, I'm always, well, not always, but I've been curious for a while now. What is the clean anger, you know? Because I'm like, is it just like when you feel like shit and you just want to just punch the fuck out of your pillow? Is that clean anger, or like, what?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as long, you know, and create a container to actually get curious about anger, what it feels like in your body. Like for me, I was so disconnected from anger. And I know that generally speaking, that men have a different relationship with anger, even from a societal perspective. Like women aren't taught to be angry, like act like a lady, keep that, you know, don't be crazy, don't be a bitch, right? All those words. Whereas men have been socially conditioned to actually, they're allowed to be angry. They're not allowed to cry, don't cry, but like be angry, right? So it's like getting curious with that anger in our relationships to it. But I think men have rage too. And I think their rage is valid. And I think there needs to be containers for men to express that in a healthy way instead of taking it out on each other or themselves. And so I don't know what that looks like specifically in men's work. I do know that there are some male practitioners who are really good at creating containers for men to experience the deep rage and pain that they do feel from their experience, which I think is important, so that you can have a healthier relationship with it and it doesn't get pushed underground and then show up when you're drunk at a bar fight, which is so, it does not make sense to me. Something that will never make sense to me is violence. Like it's very interesting. And I know a lot of people like to use evolutionary biology to describe that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Great. Use that thread here, but like we need to become more conscious of that, like that. Like we have way more access with consciousness to default to like that type of behavior.
Yeah,
you know
I've
I mean?
I've never understood it.
I never understood it either. I was like, what are you, maybe that's just like my own superiority complex, but I'm just like, I get it if like somebody is coming after you and you need to protect yourself, totally cool. Protect yourself. But like to start a fight or like, it's just, it's childish. I mean, it truly is.
Yeah.
Sorry anybody out there who's listening to this and they're like, oh gosh, that's me.
Like I don't even understand the sport of fighting. Like I don't understand why you would want to go in this ring and actually like purposely hurt somebody else. Like I do not understand that. And I tried to have a conversation with my friends about it the other day because he was a fighter, and and I was just like, I don't get it, man. Like, why do you want to do that? And it was I couldn't quite get a straight answer, right? But I was like, not like I'm not judging you for doing it, but I'm just saying I personally don't understand it. I don't understand why these people like to hurt other people to win, you know?
Yeah, it's like a dominion. It's like I'm more powerful than you, which is in the thread of evolutionary biology is like the pack leader, right? You have to kind of show dominance. And I'm just like, what are you?
Yeah, that was basically what they were kind of talking about. Yeah. Cause they were
really?
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It was like, not like a CrossFit gym when somebody else comes in and, you know, you train like from somebody else from another CrossFit gym comes in and you guys train together and you're social and you like each other, right? And you're welcoming. Like in fighting, you don't really go and train at other people's gyms, but if you do, it's more a thing of dominance and like you're trying to show who's the better gym. And I'm like, that just fucking sounds like ego to me. Like you were seeking some sort of validation, like, you know, and it sounds stupid.
It's so stupid.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I do, trust me, I do know what you mean. And I think that this is also a part of our cultural system. You know, you've got this like pyramid of who's at the top is like the most valuable, the most worthy. And it's almost like created this need for dominion and power over.
Yeah.
It doesn't work though. And it doesn't make sense. And it's really sad because it keeps us, again, disconnected from, I think, a deeper intimacy that is available to us.
Yeah.
When we aren't operating out of competition. And I think these are bigger threads of like where we're shifting, of like where this needs to go. But then there's also, you know, of course there's testosterone, and men need to move that, and they need to be, you know, activated in that way. And at least from what I've heard about people from men, but I'm like, okay, cool, go do that. Move your body. It's healthy. Like get it, like express that testosterone in whatever ways, but just not dominion over or control over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's where it gets wonky and weird and dark and shadowy.
Yeah.
For me.
Totally agree with that. Yeah. So any dudes listening, and like, I kind of get the sparring for fitness, you know, like punching, you know, punching a punching bag or sparring with another dude and punching the pads. Like that whole thing of like, you know, exerting force and like moving your body, and, you know, you can become quite flexible, and, you know, you can have a lot of agility and coordination, everything like that. I think that's awesome. But like then transferring that over into a ring to actually wanting to hurt somebody, I don't understand that bit. So, so anybody that loves fighting, I'm sorry, but I don't get it.
I'm not sorry. I'm curious, but I'm not sorry. You can be you. I don't judge you, but like, you know
actually, yeah, fuck it. I'm not sorry.
It's good. That's a Canadian rubbing off on you. You
Exactly.
were in Canada for too long.
Yeah. Right?
Oh, that's so good.
Right?
Hey?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, cool.
I'm sorry. It's like, what are you sorry for? You didn't do anything.
I bumped into you. Why are you saying sorry?
So funny how we...
Yeah, it's great.
Socialization is beautiful.
So yeah, awesome. We're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much. But before we go, can I ask you a couple of finishing questions?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Do you currently have a morning routine?
I do currently have a morning routine.
And what does it look like? Is it recurring every day? And what does it look like?
Not so much recurring every day. I used to be every day, but I just flow with what my body wants me to do now. So I just ask my body and my heart, what do we need to do today? But a lot of the times it's like I light a candle and I meditate and do some deep breathing, but I also move my body. Like this has been really helpful for me of like stretching my upper back right now. So I'm like moving my body and just allowing the energy to flow and stretch in ways that feel nourishing. Yeah,
cool. That's sweet. It's funny because there's a lot out there these days. It's a, you know, like morning routine, get your morning routine. You know, you win the morning, you win the day, right? Totally. And that's very masculine from what like doing these podcasts, and there've been 2 or 3 women that I've spoken to that are quite awake. And that, Kelsey doesn't have a morning routine.
Mm-mm.
She does whatever she feels like. M, spirited seeker. She does whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no, like, to feel in feminine flow, it's about going with the flow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's super interesting.
So to answer your question is, yes, I have a morning container that I set every day to flow within.
Okay.
So there you go. There's my morning routine. I set a container.
Sweet. All right. Next question.
Yeah.
What are you currently reading a book? I know you're writing a book, but are you currently reading a book?
I am.
What is it called? And what is the biggest thing you've taken away from it?
Oh,
too many things.
Oh gosh. I'm reading Women Who Run with Wolves from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, which is a masterpiece. If you are a woman or you identify as a woman, highly recommend this book. The biggest thing I'm taking away from it is reconnecting to the wild feminine soul. Like our journey does look different, and we need to know that journey intimately in order to, I think, reclaim all of who we are and remember who we are. So it's helping me remember who I truly am.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's awesome. Sweet. I think there was one more question, but I can't remember what it was.
Run with the wolf?
I did want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Basically, where I am now, you have actually been quite a large inspiration to, with my journey. And it all started at a Mexican restaurant in Vancouver when we were eating tacos.
Yes.
And I was like, I really want to start this business and do this and do that. But I've got a house and I have to keep working my shit job and this and that. And you were like, sell your house. And I was like, oh, but then I've got this car and that car. And then you're like, sell them. I was like, oh, but like, I'm going to lose money and this and that. And you're like, yeah, but you'll have money from your house. You can just pay the rest of that off. I'm like, yeah, but I'll be losing money. And then you're like, you're going to lose money or lose your happiness. And I was like, right. Okay. So I went and did just that. Sold my house, sold my cars, and it's been an incredible experience. And thank you so much for not only inspiring, well, you were kind of calling me on my shit, right? So thank you for that, and also inspiring me.
I was just shining a light on what you already knew to be true for yourself. I was just reminding you of what's possible for your beautiful, beautiful heart and soul. You know what? I acknowledge you for listening, for exploring that. That's a brave, brave choice to make. No matter where you are, who you are, like, I deeply acknowledge you for choosing that path of your happiness and for following the ride and showing up. Like, I'm so honored. I'm so honored to be a part of your path and to be one spark of inspiration. It's been a fun ride. I enjoy our connection and our kinship more than you know.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, thank you so much for coming on the potty today.
Thank you for having me.
And guys, that's a wrap.